Welcome to our weekly Mitzvah Shabbos program. We're now in the month of Adar, Mishenichnas Adar, Marbim B'Simcha. Also this month is the month that the Frierdiker Rebbe came to America, and we'll talk about it in Mitzvah Shem next week. But I just want to mention today a little history. The Frierdiker Rebbe came with 11 people from Riga. He took a plane, then he went to Sweden, and then he took the boat to America. And he had with him 11 people. And they arrived to America. They were on the boat about 13 days, I think. This was the last plane before the war, also the boat, the last one. In Riga, when he took the plane, it was a small plane, 16 passengers. He had with him 11 people. And he was holding manuscripts on his lap the whole time. His talis and tefillin when he put away on top. But the manuscripts, he didn't leave go. This is all written from Rabbi Mindel, because he was one of the 11 people. He came with his Rebbe in the Chamadina, the Frierdiker Rebbe, that's two, Rashag, the son-in-law of the Frierdiker Rebbe, and Chana, his wife, the Frierdiker Rebbe's daughter. Rebbe Sore was on the plane. The Rebbe Rashab's wife, the Frierdiker Rebbe's mother, and Manya, the nurse of the Rebbe Rashab's Rebbe Sore, Chaim Lieberman, the masker, Berke, Rashak's son, Rabbi Chadakov, and Mrs. Chadakov, and Rabbi Mindel. Mrs. Mindel left earlier because she was afraid to stay there because of the war. So she asked the Frierdiker Rebbe, she wants to go to England. She comes from England. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said to her, okay, you can go, but your husband, Rabbi Nissim Mindel, I have to have him with me. And he said reasons, because we have to open up Hasidus to the world. That's why they started to talk about the Tanya in English. And they says, when we'll come to America, then you'll go to pick up your wife in England. So there was 11 people. When he came to America, we all know, he said, America is a piece of ice, and we're here to break the ice of America. And we know what the Frierdiker Rebbe did, what he accomplished, what he had to accomplish. There was then a problem with keeping Shabbos, and there was hardly any Talmud Torahs and yeshivas, and Mamash, he broke the ice of America. Look at America today. This is credit to the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe when they came to America. Now, besides, in addition to the well-known activities that the Frierdiker Rebbe did in America, there is an activity not well known that the Frierdiker Rebbe initiated. And that's a weekly Torah class that was given to intellectuals, professionals in Manhattan. And that's what I want to talk to you today about that class. So the Frierdiker Rebbe arranged a class in a dentist office every single Wednesday. And the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Ramash, the Rebbe, our Rebbe was called then the Ramash, they took a big interest in this class. And they sent Rabbi Mindel every single week to go to this class, be there, and they want to hear every week a report, a written report, exactly how many people came and how the class went and what questions there were. And when Rabbi Mindel gave a report, sometimes the Rebbe, the Ramash, he wrote, and I'll probably share this with you next week. He wrote with his own handwriting pages and pages of questions and answers that people ask in that class, and he spoke about it, and then they discussed it in that class. Now that brought about the writing that the Rabbi Mindel wrote about the class to the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe. So the Frierdiker Rebbe said, I want to write a story that happened with me in the interrogation by the GPU in 1921, and I feel that you should share this story with the group, and that will give a chayes, that will give a lebedikait to the group. Now there were I think 20 people, 20 men and 5 women, and then after there was the first few times. Then afterwards it grew for more. This is, this class I don't know. It's a ruchnitik gezach how much the Rebbe and the Frierdiker Rebbe, how much koiches they put in this particular adult education class. This is unbelievable, and I'll show you soon. So the Mr. Alexander Cowan, he is a lawyer, and he gave the class to intellectuals with the participation of Rabbi Mindel. They used a textbook. The textbook was called Bible Unauthorized. It's out of print now. I have here the Bible Unauthorized. I have it right here. I think this book was used at the class. I'll tell you about it soon. and the Rebbe, I think the Rebbe was happy that they used this as a text. The story that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote is to give them a chayes. He said, whenever you have a class, you should always in the middle tell a story. Now, what I want today, first I want to, before I read the letter that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote to Dr. Mindel, to Rabbi Mindel, to discuss or read the story or tell the story to the group, he wrote an introduction. He wrote it in Hebrew, and I'll translate that into English. This introduction, I don't know why, the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote to Rabbi Shlomo Yosef Zevin. I don't know what he had to do with the group, but he wrote it to him. And the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote like this. This is a translation from the Hebrew. This book, the Bible Unauthorized, is mainly an English explanation of Sefer Bereshis with lengthy introduction where the author explains such concepts as creation and Hashgacha Proteus, divine providence. When my son-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe writes, Horav Menachem Mendel Schneerson Shlita, arrived in this country, that was in 1941, I asked him to review the book and to tell me his opinion on whether it would fulfill its hopeful potential. After several months, my son-in-law, Horav Menachem Mendel, informed me that the book is written in an intellectual style and must be studied properly due to its deep concepts. Without a doubt, it will be a great worth to those who study it and convince them to keep the practical commandments. For in many ways, the author defeats the arguments of the heretics and proves the truth of the Torah. That's what the Rebbe said, excuse me. Hence, I borrowed, imagine, the Frierdiker Rebbe borrowed, excuse me, the sum of $2,000, those days, $2,000, from one of my acquaintances, lending them to the author for the publication of this book. When it was published, I encouraged one of my acquaintances, Mr. Alexander Cowan, a businessman and an intellectual, to gather some of his associates, likewise businessmen and college graduates, and begin a class in this book. Throughout the first year, they would convince sporadically, and in the second year, they organized a weekly class. As time went on, by the membership grew slowly. A change began to be noticed among the members. The study had persuaded them to avoid non-kosher food, and today there was, thank God, a few dozen members, English speaking, who had no prior knowledge of Judaism and are putting on film and Shabbos and so on. Then the Rebbe writes, the Bible Unauthorized was authored by Mr. Aaron Levitt under the pen name Amos Aaron Harris. So this is what the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote. Now you can see how much koiches the Frierdiker Rebbe put in this class. Now I'll share with you the letter that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote to Rabbi Mindel, and I'll show you on the screen. You can see it, and I'll show you the typed letter. He wrote it with his handwriting, where I don't have that in front of me. But this letter that Frierdiker Rebbe signed, and that reading to them this letter will give them a cheshek, will give them a chayes, a lebedikite in the class. So the Rebbe sat down, he wrote it, then it was typed, and then the Frierdiker Rebbe signed that type paper. So here I'm going to read this story that the Frierdiker Rebbe took time for the class. This is a translation, an English translation, the way Rabbi Mindel translated. I don't know if it's mamish word for word. If you want to know word for word, you can always see on the screen the way the Frierdiker Rebbe signed. But I'm going to read the way Rabbi Mindel wrote. It was in the summer of 1921, in the month of Tammuz, July, when the Rebbe was invited to appear at the Cheka, extraordinary committee, later to be known as the GPU, the equivalent of the Nazi Gestapo, and dreaded no less. The Rebbe was then in Rostov, and the invitation was the customary one, as the Rebbe was davening, still in mourning after his father. This was in the year of Avelis for the Rebbe Rashab. 3 Czechs entered the room armed to their teeth with rifle guns, Caucasian knives, a belt of ammunition. Not attempting to disguise their hatred, they went up to the Rebbe and told him he was requested to accompany them immediately to the Cheka. Two of them were of the Yevsexias, that's the Jewish section, and the third was a Gentile. When the Rebbe told him he wished to conclude his prayers, the two Jews almost fell upon trying to tear off the Rebbe's tallis and film, and were, if not for the Gentile companion, they would have forced him to accompany them before concluding his prayers. The Gentile guard, however, prevailed upon them to let the Rebbe conclude his prayer. Now, in parentheses, he writes, incidentally, the Rebbe recognized one of the Jews as a native of Shavel, having once come to him for help, and the Rebbe secured a position for him with a tobacco firm, and even lent him some money to start business of his own. That was, of course, before the revolution. The end of parentheses now. When the Rebbe concluded saying the last Kaddish, he took off his tallis and tefillin and accompanied them to the dreaded Cheka. He had an armed guard on each side of him and one walking behind, like a very dangerous criminal. In those days, one never knew whether one could come back alive from a visit to the Cheka. He was led into a large room where some of 15 men sat along the table on each side with 2 men at its head. The Rebbe was placed at the end of the table, still surrounded by the armed guard. One of the 2 men sitting at the head of the table turned to the Rebbe, saying, "We are members of the committee investigating religious activity under the auspices of the party. We are engaged at present in investigating the Jewish faith. We had some questions cleared up by Rabbis Berman and Goldberg, whom we had invited here. Now you have been invited to clear some questions with regard to Kabbalah and Hasidus." They spoke in Russian. That's what the Rebbe writes here. The Rebbe replied in Yiddish, "I have already been invited twice before to the Cheka, when I already started that I would not deviate from my principles, and the man or devil hasn't been created yet who could make me give up as much as an iota." Before the Rebbe managed to conclude his few words, one of the Czechs present, sitting near the head of the table, picked up the gun lying in front of him. In addition of being armed with a gun, each one had a gun lying on the table before him, no doubt to intimidate these taken for an inquisition, saying, "This toy does away with many principles and opens the mouth of the dumb." "You are absolutely mistaken," the Rebbe said, "for this toy impresses only those who do not believe. These cowards who have only one world and many gods, to whom each passion is a god, and they are afraid to lose this only world. It's only world. But as to Jews who have only one God, but two worlds, this toy does not frighten and even makes no impression whatsoever. We have not called you for the purpose of annoying you, said the chairman. And let's hear your principles. Maybe we can get together on them. So the Rabbi said, my principles is that I do not wish to hear nor to speak any other language but Jewish, even among Christians, and especially among men who belong to the Jewish people, because a lot of these people are Jewish, maybe most of them. How do you know that we are Jews? One of them asked. So the Rebbe answered, maybe I'm mistaken, and not all those present here are Jews. My grandfather, that means the Rebbe Marash, could recognize a Jew at a glance, even in the street. Once when he was in Kiev, walking along Krechnik Street, he stopped a young man dressed in modern clothes, clearly anxious to disguise his Jewish origin, and asked him where a famous professor lived. The young man became incensed and said, how do you know that I am a Jew? Said my grandfather, the bris left an effect upon your nose. Now I cannot recognize by that same criterion. But I still believe I am not mistaken, the Rebbe said. The first question was, you observe your faith in every detail. You keep your head covered. You wear tzitzis, and so forth. Now all these things you do you do it because of conviction or because of your faith and habit? From absolutely conviction, said the Rebbe. If so, convince us also, and bring us to the same spiritual level as yours, they said. I am prepared to oblige you and study, and surely you will give me an opportunity to fulfill your request. You will admit, however, that if a student of astronomy is stopped in the street by someone with a request to explain to him the system of the stars and planets, surely the student of astronomy would tell him, I cannot explain it to you here in the street right now. But if you really wish to learn, come up to the planetarium and you will see with your own eyes through the telescope the movements of the stars and planets. Similarly, I say to you, the Rebbe said, if you really want to learn and be convinced about our faith in God and His Torah, come with me to the house of God, put on tefillin, eat kosher, observe Shabbos. Then your mind will be clarified as well as your heart, and you will be able to understand an ethical thought, and I will surely bring you little by little to that conviction in the truth of our Torah, of our faith and our Torah. But first explain to us intellectually, and then we'll take it upon to observe the Jewish faith. But until then, we cannot accept the religious matters as truth. So the Rebbe said, you surely know definitely that food not merely satisfies the stomach and gives strength, but even fattens. because it turns into blood and flesh. In medicine, the process of digestion is clearly explained. But suppose someone said, I shall refuse to eat until it will be explained to me how the food turns into blood and flesh. It is necessary to believe and eat and drink first, then go and study medicine if you wish. And so it is also with religion. Now, these words made a profound impression on the people. And this is the story that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote down, and this mamish, they were nispal from this. That gave this story gave them a chayas in this whole group, and they spoke about it for weeks and weeks. This story that the Rebbe wrote. So we see here how much the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, put on this group. There's much more to speak, but there's not time. Mitzvah Hashem. Next week, I will share with you the written, and I'll show you the Ksav Yad from our Rebbe, the questions and answers, and we'll discuss that this was discussed later on in the class. Now, from that class became Mamish Balchuvas, and the children and the grandchildren. Some of them I even know today. In Mitzvah, next week we'll continue our weekly program. Thank you.